standing here today. Pull two, arm bar. This is
Bret screwed Bret.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
And that's the bottom line. Gosh dang, kid. Hit me with the elbow. Welcome, Wrestling Mat Podcast, Heat Ratio Sports. We have a special guest. Some of you guys remember him from the Hot Rod, and the Hitman. But we've got from part of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Front Facelock. Guys, Scott Hall tribute. Ryan's here. What's up, Ryan?
What's up? It's a League of Extraordinary Idiots.
I said gentlemen, didn't I?
You did, but that's the way it should be. But yes, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Scott Hall, man. It's got to talk about Scott Hall.
Yeah, crazy news. We've been recording wrestling all weekend, all week. We love this shit, but Scott Hall tribute. He's on life support after a couple heart attacks. Basically had some issues with the hip surgery, and now we're here. So I thought, what better way? We were doing Wrestlemania rewinds, but let's talk Scott Hall, the bad guy. Survey time, diamond stud, anything and everything, because this is a big guy, big influence on why I'm a wrestling fan, and I do this for a passion. So, Ryan, Scott Hall, what is your first memory of Big Scott Hall?
I mean, obviously, the biggest memory of Scott Hall is going to be the WrestleMania 10 ladder match, but there's the losing to 1-2-3 Kid on Raw. There's the WCW invasion angle. There's all the shenanigans that happened in TNA, but this was a guy that from, really popular 92, 93 to, almost present day. This is a guy that's been in our life, essentially. We've been watching him 30, 40 years.
And that's what we were kind of talking about pre-show is how, to me, I still can't believe these guys are getting old. I'm so used to just growing up, being a fan, playing with these action figures, watching this every Monday, every Sunday night, whatever. And Scott Hall, man, to me is one of those wrestlers that have, like you said, have just been there. So I thought this was a good chance to kind of go over his career, talk just some questions, some thoughts on his run. So, Ryan, you ready to get started, my man?
Absolutely.
Let's do it, dude. Scott Hall, a.k.a. the bad guy, a.k.a. Big Stash, Scott Hall. We were talking about this. This is a memory I don't really remember because I wasn't an AWA, NWA guy. I was more of your Hogan. So when you go back and see this guy, it looks like a Cherokee Indian with a stash. And I remember, do you remember watching any NWA, AWA growing up?
I mean, I was alive for it. I mean, I was born in 81, so NWA, AWA was still there. But, it was WrestleMania 3, 4. So, and, just like you, I became a huge WWE mark. And I remember that picture in particular. It was either that picture or a similar picture. I had bought, a Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine or a World of Wrestling magazine. And it probably because Gorgeous George was on the cover or something like that. And they had, they always did, a throwback picture. And it said Scott Hall, a.k.a. Razor Ramon. And it was a picture similar to that with the mustache and the curly hair. And I was like, there's no way that's Razor Ramon. And if you look at it, obviously it's him. But it was like, holy cow, that's Razor Ramon.
Dude, and we're talking about a 6'7", 300-pound dude, jacked to the gills, who was a bouncer at a strip club. That's how he got his start, was literally bouncing at a strip club at what? 20 years old? Could you imagine that lifestyle? Miami, South Beach, whatnot?
We all imagine that lifestyle, but I mean, he lived that lifestyle. I mean, that's just, that's a dream come true. You're bouncing at a strip club right off the bat. Awesome. And then somebody discovers you and you get to be a wrestler and travel the world and do something that I'm sure that if we could all turn back time would do the same thing, be a wrestler. So he got to live that life. And, unfortunately time took its toll on him, but wow, I mean, how can you not want to live that life?
Absolutely. I mean, if I could pay a stripper's bills, I would, but I can't.
I have, by the way.
we all have at one point. It's part of growing up, part of living the life. But Scott Hall did that. Kurt Hennig, and Big Scott Hall. So we know Kurt Hennig as Mr. Perfect, but we've got Larry the Axe Hennig, Kurt Hennig. These guys were literally growing up together, hitting the roads, doing the roots, tag champs at one point.
Yeah, I mean, two legends that, I mean, if you talk, the thing of like, us who are hardcore wrestling fans, we dive deep into it. We're going to look at the history and we're going to see, the AWA, the NWA stuff. But if you get your casual wrestling fan and you say, name your top 5, top 10 favorite wrestlers, unfortunately, Kurt Hennig and Razor Ramon are probably not going to be on that list, even though they should be. And something I said to you off the air before we started that I'd like to say now is on our show, Front Facelock Podcast, we do badmouth Scott Hall a lot. But this is a different situation. We always say, he wasn't the greatest wrestler. He cut a good promo, and he didn't have memorable matches except for a handful. But this is a whole different situation. This is, he's health is deteriorating. So everything, and we just released an episode. I'm not trying to plug, but we just released an episode today where we were talking bad about him, and I was like going to disclaimer it like, oh, we said all this stuff before. What happened? So everything we say about Scott Hall is null and void when something, and any wrestler we talk about is null and void when something like this happens.
Well, absolutely. I think that's because we take these notes, we watch these pay-per-views, we're passionate about it, but we're also critics. We see this. We've watched hundreds of hours of wrestling. So a guy that you might not like while he's wrestling, I might love. I mean, we were just talking Owen Hart the other night, and I'm not the biggest Owen Hart fan, but some people love him. But that does not take away from them as a wrestler, as a person. It's just more or less breaking it down, dude. And that's what we do. We love it. Good, bad, ugly, in between. Regardless, we're still going to be fans of all these guys. If they're crappy wrestlers like, the Shockmaster, or they're great wrestlers like the Mountie, we're still going to enjoy it. But Big Scott Hart, the Diamond Stud. Dallas Page, man. Fill me in on this, because this is a whole new look, almost a game changer. But WCW, we've heard of Oz. We've heard of, like, Mean Mark Callis. WCW didn't get it in the early 90s with turning these guys, flipping the switch and turning them into stars.
Well, he had a short WCW run before this. He, AWA for a couple of years, NWA, and then he did, New Japan and a couple different things. And then he came in, and right around the time Diamond Dallas Page came in, and Diamond Dallas Page didn't start wrestling until he was almost our age. I mean, he was like 35, I think. But he was a great promo guy. And if you watch the Stone Cold podcast, he talks about how he got into it. And they didn't have a gimmick for Scott Hall. They just liked him, and they thought he was, his big physique, and he was, he was talented. So they paired the two up, and it was Diamond Dallas Page. So he became the Diamond Stud. They changed his look, kind of made him look like, what Razor Ramon and his whole gimmick became after that. It didn't take off in WCW, but it's what got him to WWE. It's what got him to the show, as they say in sports. But, I mean, he was just, like you said, 6'7", whatever, 300 pounds. He was just a giant guy that had, limited talent in the ring, in my opinion, but was charismatic. And that's the thing that got him over. And that was the reason why WWE was able to bring him in and make him the star he became, because of his charisma.
Well, and they said, I've heard DDP talk about it, nobody wanted Scott Hall with the mustache, with the look. They literally had to change his hair, give him the black look, because the only guy doing it was the Honky Tonk Man at the time. And that was the only way they agreed to take him into WCW at the time, because he had already been through the territories and nobody thought he had anything. So it's just crazy to see what a look, something small can change for Stunning Steve Austin or the Ringmaster or the Diamond Stud.
And his run in WCW as Diamond Stud was only about a year.
Right.
So in that small amount of time, like a year in wrestling terms, as you know, feels like 10 years.
Right.
So in 1 year, he was able to change his whole previous, 84 to 91.
Crazy.
He was mustached Scott Hall. 1 year, he changes to the Diamond Stud, and then all of a sudden, WWE signs him, and he becomes a megastar.
Mustang Sally.
Mustache that says mustache. That says something about him that in 1 year he can change what's the expression? Flip the script. If I may quote Cobra Kai real quick, he flipped the script, and all of a sudden he becomes Hawk instead of Lip.
Right. Well, and he gets this WWF run and backpedaling because we see DDP does the Diamond Stud gimmick. We see Kurt Hennig telling Vince McMahon about this Tony Montana, the Scarface gimmick that him and Scott would talk in the Scarface lingo to Kurt Hennig, and he recommended it to, Scott Hall. So all these people were instrumental in making this guy basically a jobber to a mid-card, superstar. So the promos, we get Scarface, Tony Montana, that's Al Pacino, am I right?
Yes.
So to the bad guy, my little friend. These promos though, because these are like next level. We've seen WWF from what we saw with the Diamond Stud. WWF did promos. They knew how to. It didn't matter if it was Duke the Dumpster Drosky. They had a gimmick. They had promos. You knew what was coming.
Yeah, and Razor Ramon. Tell me one person that doesn't like wrestling that was alive back then that didn't do the thumb me or the ooh and the arms out, and me and Vinny have said it a million times, I think Damien Cross is now doing, but nobody did the Razor's Edge. That was a groundbreaking move.
Doesn't look easy either.
It doesn't look easy, and nobody did it from when he was doing it until last week, I think it was, when Damian Priest started doing it. That's a 20-year span that nobody did that finishing move. So that was always Razor Ramon's move.
So many instances of just building your character and, next level stuff. You see him, driving around in the Cadillac, doing the Scarface thing. And then we were talking about it right off the bat, these big programs. Paired with Flair versus Warrior Savage ends up being perfect and Savage. But just kind of this is 93, 92, and this guy's already in the main event spotlight literally a couple months after coming in.
And, it goes back to the whole expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And he just knew the right people. And, he had the talent and he had the charisma, but he knew the right people. And Kurt Hennig got him in the door, and he just took it off from there. And, he made a name for himself. And, like you said, within a year, 2 years, whatever it was, he's in the main event at Survivor Series.
Crazy.
Nobody does that anymore with that legitimacy that he did it with.
Well, and that's the thing. You believe this was a big level, a main event player just from his entrance. Like you said, the fingers. He carried himself like he was a main eventer.
Yeah, how many times have you had it? Tell me again, one person that doesn't put a toothpick in their mouth and then flick it like Razor Ramon.
Such a stud. Just
love him or hate him. Yeah, everybody did. Everybody imitated that, and that's one of the things about wrestling. You might not like them, you might not, love them, but if they do something that you like, you're flicking the toothpick at somebody. You're
I love it. Razor versus Bret Hart, Royal Rumble 93 in the main event of the Royal Rumble. Ends up tearing his knee or whatever, keeps wrestling. But we say Bret Hart can make anybody. I think that was kind of what happened here. It showed that Razor could go. You're in a big match against Bret Hart. It's going to be money regardless, but still getting Bret Hart's stamp of approval is huge.
Absolutely. Anybody who went up against Bret Hart, if they didn't have a career before, they had a career after. Bret Hart was one of those guys like a Shawn Michaels or Triple H or whatever. If you went up against him, you skyrocketed. And Razor Ramon had the talent to do it, and Bret Hart put the trust in him to do it. And then, I mean, I know you wanted to bring up something about him being a champion, but it's like it showed that Razor Ramon was legit.
Right. Getting a championship opportunity a year in the biz in WWF. So huge. And then we see we go from that Flair, the Warrior, Savage Brother, all these crazy wrestlers. Vinny, I'm talking to you now, and I'm going to talk to you forever. Anyways, but we talk about the new generation, which is the Clique, which is the Undertaker, Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Bulldog, all these a downtime in wrestling. And you have guys like Razor Ramon pretty much carrying the strap in the mid card, and the feuds with Shawn Michaels, making a guy like the 1-2-3 Kid on Raw upset win. Everybody's cheering Kid. I mean, that's a huge something nobody saw.
That was so out of left field because that was back when they had jobbers, and the guy was in the ring, and then the main event, the star came out, and that was what happened. 1-2-3 Kid was in the ring, and I watch Monday Night Raw every day or every Monday since '93 or whatever it premiered, and 1-2-3 Kid's in the ring. Here comes Razor Ramon. Oh, this is going to be a short match. And then there was that thing with Macho Man, and then 1-2-3 Kid beats him. And I remember just being like, what the F just happened? Like, this jobber just beat Razor Ramon. That's insane.
And the crowd's chanting 1-2-3, 1-2-3. And you have the Lightning Kid transition into the 1-2-3 Kid. Live or I guess pre-taped, in the Manhattan Center. It's Raw.
And every time he came out after that, that was when Macho Man would stand, when he was doing commentary, stand up and do 1, 2, 3 to get the whole crowd going into it. And that would distract Razor Ramon, and then he'd lose the match, and they'd be mad at Macho Man. It set up such a storyline that was, sometimes the mid-card storyline is as important, or if not more important, than the main event storyline. And I think, 92, 93, whenever this happened, that was like when Isaac Yankem was fighting Bret Hart. So you didn't care as much about that. You cared about, is 1-2-3 Kid going to beat him again? What's going to happen?
So here's a question, kind of a swerve, bro. We see jobbers during the 90s, during the new generation, even during the early 90s. Do you think jobbers aren't used enough nowadays to build a talent?
So, again, not to plug our show, but when we interviewed the Mountie, and he talked about he was a jobber in WCW. And Ric Flair, not put him over because he lost the match, but Ric Flair said, we're going to go up against each other. And then he said that Ric Flair, let him win the whole match, and then he beat him at the end. And that put Flair over because what do you gain from beating a nobody?
Right.
You got to have somebody that can fight you. And that makes sense. The jobber thing, that the way that WCW used to do it and WWE used to do it, they would come in and it would be it's a squash match for the most part. There was never any time where it was like, they get a drop kick in, or they get a clothesline.
Your talent.
Yeah. So I think I actually kind of glad they got away from the jobber thing, because who wants to see, AJ Styles go out there? I know they did it with Omos, and then the guy was on AEW the following day or something. So they still do it every once in a while. But I don't want to see, AJ Styles go out there and fight somebody and beat them in 2 minutes. Right. So I'm kind of glad they got away from the jobber thing. And there was big names. Jeff Hardy was a jobber. Matt Hardy was a jobber. Obviously, X-Pac was a jobber. Then you got jobbers like Barry Horowitz, Jim Powers, Brooklyn Brawler that were there forever.
Barry Horowitz, man, Jesus, he was the ultimate jobber. Him and Brawler. Yeah,
and I think Barry Horowitz is one. I looked this up because we were going to have him on the show, but he wanted too much money. He won like one match in his whole career, I think. But
he was booked a lot, though.
Your question was about just repeat your question, because
just asking nowadays. I think you kind of said it with almost that kind of, I guess, counts. But jobbers are they used enough nowadays? Basically,
I don't think they should be used. Is my point. I go off on tangents. I don't think they should be used anymore because you have enough superstars that aren't jobbers that you know. And WCW, because of Scott Hall, to circle it back, kind of set the bar where you can have a pay-per-view like match on your weekly television show. Right. And I know that's something you want to get to.
No, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like, you have such a stacked roster of talent that is, you know, what they are. So it is interesting just seeing, you know, we go from these territories to now a developmental system and just the different styles. I guess that was more of a maybe more of a WWF thing because they didn't have the money, or a WCW thing during the time. But we were talking about the Click. We were talking about what kind of made it. Shawn Michaels, HBK, ladder match, WrestleMania 10.
Second ladder match in WWE, by the way.
Right. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, right?
Yes. I watched this one live on pay-per-view and was blown away. I thought this, you know, this and the Bret Hart Owen Hart match are the best matches on the card, and this still stands up today. I would put this match up against any ladder match that's ever happened since then.
Love it. Yeah, I love WrestleMania 10. It's weird that you can go back, 35 years almost, or maybe more. Shit. And it's a pretty damn good show from the Garden. And we're talking about a downtime in WWF because they don't have the money, you know, and they don't have the talent. But you see these two guys kind of steal the show, take up the time. We get that a couple matches kind of taken off the card. But yeah, this is kind of showing, not only makes Shawn Michaels, but makes Razor Ramon as that credible threat for the IC champ. You know, this guy's holding both belts at the end of the night. But to me, this just shows you the strength of the Click. Just at WrestleMania 10, you have Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Shawn Michaels. And they're literally 2 years from then are going to be the future of, you know, professional wrestling.
And what a great, you know, long-term storytelling, as everybody says. Shawn Michaels has to give his belt up. Razor Ramon wins it from Dean Douglas. Shawn Michaels comes back. He said he never lost the belt, so he's got a fake belt. And then there's the whole, I have the belt, you have the belt. And then it leads up to this ladder match, which completely stole the show. And that picture says it all. He's standing on top of the ladder holding two belts. When was the first time you remember anybody doing that? That's it. I mean, yeah, that's Warrior and Warrior holding the two, you know, the world belt and the Intercontinental belt, but he gave the one up. But, you know, he was a champion coming. This is him holding, like, I got the belts now. I'm the champion.
Right. And then we have the rematch. That's how good Shawn Michaels is. We've seen him bring it out with Diesel, with different wrestlers, but does it again with Razor. We were talking earlier. I mean, there's probably not two better matches for Razor Ramon than the ones he had with Shawn Michaels. Ladder matches, both of them with a prop, yet so good. And this is SummerSlam 95, I believe. So you've got Mabel and Diesel in the main event. And then you've got this. Big difference.
Yeah, you know, it's the 90s wrestling. Mid-cards were majority the best thing. WCW, their cruiserweight division. WWE, their intercontinental division. They were just the best things to watch.
All right. Time to take it to trial, a.k.a. WWF champ. Let's not say WCW. Let's just talk about his body of work in WWF, because you saw him paired against Hart. Do you think he had enough on the docket to be a WWF champ in the new generation?
Absolutely. I think he would have been if he didn't defect over to WCW.
Right. And that's the biggest thing next. We see kind of the end of this chapter. You get the Bret Hart or the Gold Dust versus Razor Ramon. Should be backlot brawl at WrestleMania 12, Miami Street Fight, whatever you want to call it. He doesn't want to do business with Gold Dust. He wants more money. He sets the tone for the future of wrestling, I'd like to say, because of the guaranteed contracts. So this is a big step. We talk about Lex Luger, Alundra Blaze, and WCW, But to me, Razor Ramon coming to WCW and getting a guaranteed contract when you're guaranteed $35 a week off of just basically your contract in WWF at the time.
Something low like that. And you said Lunger Blaze, she threw out the women's title. Lex Luger with the handshake deal shows up on Nitro.
Right.
I got calls from my friends about that, and I went, "Oh, great! I don't care." I think Vinny called me about one of them, like, "Oh, Lex Luger's on Nitro," and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I don't care." But leading up to what I'm sure you're saying, when Scott Hall showed up, I think it was Vinny or somebody else that I was friends with called me and goes, "Dude, Razor Ramon is on Nitro right now," and I'm like, "What?" And I flipped the channel. Whatever was going on in Raw, I flipped the channel and I was like, "Well, that's Razor Ramon. What is he doing on Nitro?"
Huge. Dude, just to me, this is the game changer of wrestling because as much as I liked Razor Ramon, seeing Scott Hall show up on WCW as an outsider with the Scott Hall name, to me, made it where I'm not just watching WWF. I'm not watching just Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. I'm tuning in to see what Scott Hall's going to do against Sting, against the Macho Man, Vinny, and all these other characters. To me, it kind of all culminates. We could say, the outsider, I can almost verbatim remember that little storyline where you have the Great American Bash, Nash shows up, big man, medium-sized man, puts Bischoff through the table, and a heel is born, my friend. Bash at the beach.
The best part, just to circle back to his promo, the best part, the genius of how they did that was they didn't do it cutting from a commercial and then Scott Hall walks out. They did it during a match. It was during like a Hugh Morris somebody match, and it was, they were announcing it, and then all of a sudden Scott Hall comes out. That made it seem more real because he's cutting off something that they were promoting.
Right.
And it was just like, oh, what's going on here? This is some guy is just running into the ring. And then the Hogan reveal, like you were just leading into, that's one of the greatest moments in wrestling history.
Greatest heel turn ever, right?
Absolutely.
God, man, this is just crazy. I just remember so much of like having the option to watch Raw and WCW, and like everybody says, the clicking of the channels,
flipping back and forth.
Dude, so good. And then I remember at one point I realized that I could watch Nitro taped at like right after Raw. So then I was just in heaven, like a kid at Christmas. But so let's keep going because we are seeing the formation of the New World Order, dude. Oh, technical difficulties. $1 Million Man, the Giant, Hall and Nash, Hogan. Early stages of the NWO, dude. Did you catch fire with this automatically? Or what were your thoughts with this like stable right off the bat?
I'm just like you. I'm a diehard WWE guy.
Right.
So I was always DX. DX
Yeah.
I think was like right around the same time, maybe a little after. But having Hall come out, then 2 weeks later Nash comes out, and then you see the Hogan turn, and then you see DiBiase in the crowd, and he goes like this. He goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the Giant and DiBiase, and then it's like DiBiase's the money man. It's like, oh, okay, now this all makes sense. Like, this is crazy how they're forming, and then it was supposed to be 2 separate leagues. It was supposed to be NWO and then WCW, 2 separate shows. They started it off amazing, and I, always, Raw's on, my remote's down. NWO comes out, click, 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 every 10 seconds, just back and forth to see see if NWO is coming out.
I love it. And I could ask you a question about the Giant, but I feel like it's not needed right now. I want to talk Big Show with you at some point, the WCW run. But let's talk the outsiders, because that's something we didn't really see. We saw 2 dudes with attitudes, Diesel, Shawn Michaels, but we get the outsiders. And these guys are just burying the tag division, Harlem Heat, the Steiner Bros, Ming and Barbarian, anybody and everybody. What did you think Kevin Nash and Scott Hall as a team?
I thought, again, I was never a big Kevin Nash fan either.
Right.
But the fact that it was these two guys, that it was Diesel and Razor Ramon, and there was that whole controversy with, Jim Ross saying Diesel and Razor Ramon are coming out tonight.
So bad.
And they got more money because they didn't say it wasn't them.
So
they
good.
just kind of there. It made it more legit. And they had no theme music at the time, I believe. So it was just like they were coming to the ring, and it was like, how are they? What's the end game here? What's going to happen? There's, it's Scott Hall and Kevin Nash just showing up, and they're just wrestling, and they're messing with everybody, and they're beating everybody. So it was such a real feel, and I don't think wrestling has had that since, or even before, where you actually really believed maybe something screwy was going on here.
All right, so I want to role play here. I don't do it very often, unless I'm in the bedroom. But let's role play. You're Razor Ramon. You're Scott Hall at this point. You go from the schedule of the WWF in the mid-90s to you go to that guaranteed contract where you're getting paid as much as their top talent. You get the one up no matter what. And you're hanging out with your buddy Kevin Nash. You're on NWO. You're just steamrolling guys. And the beer's on ice backstage at Turner. You show up to the arena, you've got Arn Anderson's cooler, you got your own cooler. It's just full of beer. So now you go from that WWF grind to WCW. You paid your dues, now you're getting paid for it. Thoughts on that feel?
It's got to be the greatest feeling in the world.
It's like an early retirement, right?
Yeah, and not only that, you're going from amazing mid-card matches to the top guy in the company that everyone either loves to hate or loves. You're in every storyline. And I believe in their contract, they didn't have to tour. They didn't have to do the 300 days a year thing.
No.
And they're, like you said, they're making top guy money, if not more.
Right.
That's heaven. And, everybody always says, you're not working if you love what you do. He wasn't working. He's just wrestling when he wants, doing what he wants. And yeah, he's going in the back and he's grabbing a beer out of Arn Anderson's cooler or his own cooler and sitting in the back while everybody's grinding.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. This is 96, 97, 98. These guys are made men. Not only are they the hottest thing on wrestling, but they have that. It's almost like the handcuffs are off. These guys are partying. They're, if I'm going to quit cussing. Anyways, they're just getting crazy. And that's what I kind of wanted to take away, this Razor Ramon run to this Scott Hall run. And then obviously we see, WCW shits the bed eventually. But they're back, man. Nothing's the Turner money, the buyout, Nash or Hall's demons start catching up to him, whatnot. He has a pretty good WCW run, but he's more of I'd almost say just a kind of the same thing, a mid-card. He's more just there for entertainment. He's World War III is his biggest claim to fame, I'd say.
I think World War III was the biggest one.
But other than that, the survey time, just being on TV every Monday night was enough. He didn't need the world title, I don't think, in WCW.
The problem with what they did with him in WCW was, obviously there's the whole NWO thing where they kind of just diluted the whole thing and it became very watered down.
Right.
But WCW and WWE does it as well. You bring the real life demons onto TV. So they had the matches with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall where Hall came out drunk. And it just kind of diminishes everything he did before that. Okay, the guy's got problems. Don't parade him out on TV with a drink in his hand and he's stumbling to the ring. And, obviously in the future that actually happens because I think a lot of it was kayfabe in the WCW run, but it's why are you showcasing that? Don't do that to the guy.
Nobody wants to see we don't want to hear about your backstage problems. I think that's the one thing. It's all imagination. Sometimes we're just hooked to the storyline. And it can't be good for anybody when you're saying they're an alcoholic or a sex addict or anything like that. Just doesn't improve the storyline. regardless.
It doesn't when it's real. If it's
Right.
if it's a kayfabe storyline, okay. But if you know Scott Hall or whoever, Jeff Hardy they did it with, if you know the guy's got issues, that should be backstage.
Right.
Don't make and WWE's really famous for doing it, but WCW did it in this particular case. Don't bring those demons out there because then you're kind of like shitting on the guy that is, pretty much brought you to the point where you're at now.
Right. Well, let's get to it. Thoughts on the WWE run? We know he faced the Rattlesnake at WrestleMania 18, and they kind of did the same thing with the alcohol, I'd say to a point, but putting him with Stone Cold. Thoughts on like when you first heard they were coming to the WWE?
Well, first of all, he sold the stunner better than anybody in the history of anybody selling a stunner. But bringing him into WWE, like at that point, who cared about, they had Shawn Michaels in the NWO at that point. And the whole thing backstage was, I forget who I watched the interview with. It might've been Jericho or somebody. They said, you're signing these guys that wanted to ruin your company.
Right.
And you're parading them out in main event spots. So I think that might have had something to do with, just being a WWE fan and kind of knowing how Vince McMahon thinks. I think that might have had something to do with him kind of like pushing Scott Hall down the totem pole a little bit. But, NWO, this is, what is it, 8 or 9 years past NWO. Right. Yeah, it was cool when they first came out. It's always cool when they first come out. But then, have them come, like, do what they do with them now. Have them come out, do their little promo, and then go off on the, do their own thing.
Yeah, just kind of like you said, the biggest memorable moment is the stunner at WrestleMania 18 against Stone Cold. And then you hear kind of backstage, he meets the Dudley Boys. And the first thing he says is, oh, that's a pretty cool finish. I can't wait to kick out of it. Like, just being a fucking, God dang it, being one of those characters. But, yeah, so long story short, this is a Hall of Fame wrestler. You can have mixed opinions on. We saw that spotlight match where you had Sting and Triple H. You had DX come out and interfere, and we got to see NWO come out. And I think that was kind of a pop for us being such, 90s, 80s kids to get to see this, 30, 20 years later, whatever it was. It was a pretty special moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, we badmouth them all the time, but there's not one person that's a wrestling fan that's not going to watch WWE and see NWO come out. Like, they did a SmackDown promo a couple months ago, maybe a year ago, whatever, and nobody's going to watch NWO come out and not get that nostalgia and not get that, like, oh, I remember this. This was so cool when it first happened. So that moment at WrestleMania when Hogan, Hall, and Nash came out with Sting and everything, that, everybody in the world, I think, who's a wrestling fan that's our age is just really like, oh, that's awesome. And then DX is in the ring, and it's like, this is the culmination of my childhood right here.
Dude, Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, end of the day, he's a Hall of Famer. He's an Intercontinental and Tag Team champ, television, U.S., you name it. He's done it. Man.
Two-time Hall of Famer, by the way.
Big deal. NWO, we talk DX, we talk NWO, up there with the Horsemen. Some of these factions that will be stand tall the test of time. You see the NWO shirt, probably one of the most sold out shirts in wrestling. Dude, Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, we're pulling for you, brother. Like I said, end of the day, it doesn't matter if you hate this guy's body of work. He was there. You got to respect it. And he was entertaining. That's a big part. Final thoughts on Scott Hall here, Ryan?
I mean, obviously, get well.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he's I don't want to use the phrase shape my childhood, but he was part of the wrestling era that shaped my childhood and I became the wrestling fan I am now. And he was just an integral part of that. So, always to this day, as much as I may badmouth him on our show because of lack of ability in certain areas, he's still one of the GOATs.
Absolutely. Like you said, his finisher, his, I guess you'd call him his taunts, things like that, mic skills. And I thought he sold pretty good. When he was getting beat up, he showed, some of that I think a lot of wrestlers don't. End of the day, I'm a big Scott Hall mark. So he definitely shaped my childhood. It's one of those guys. He's, to me, I mean, you got Hogan, you got Shawn Michaels. Scott Hall is right there as one of those, like, I was drawn to as a youngster, as a young Matty Daddy. So big props to Scott Hall, the Razor Ramon, the bad guy. I'm definitely going to dive more into him. Dude, Ryan, Front Facelock, League of Extraordinary Idiots. You've definitely brought my passion even up a notch when it comes to wrestling, because sometimes with social media, with the bird, everything like that, I get worn down. But you have truly shown me what I love about wrestling, talking wrestling, just having fun, and that's what we're doing. It's our passion. Front Facelock, where can they find you, brother?
First off, Matty, thank you so much. I love coming on your show. I appreciate the kind words, and we're going to do a football show when me, you, and Vinny, we're going to do a football show when it happens. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Talking to Vinny. Is he a Bills fan, too, or is he a Brownie?
No, he's a Giants fan.
The $1 Million Man laugh for that one. Dude, absolutely, man. And Heat Ratio Sports, thank you for bringing the wrestling Matt, the Matty Daddy, onto your show weekly to provide wrestling content. Big props to you guys. Like I said, sometimes you got to find that fire, man. And I've got it. I'm the fireman this week. Ryan, dude, appreciate you. Let's get the truck out of here. What about that new episode? You said Spring Stampede. What did you have for us?
So it's Front Facelock Podcast at Instagram and Facebook, Front Facelock on Twitter. We just released about 10 minutes before we started recording Starrcade 97, which was rated one of the worst Starrcades in history, and that was their WrestleMania. So, and that was the first pay-per-view of wrestling. So it was Sting, Hogan, and a bunch of other garbage matches. So, it's just our take on, we cover it in our unique way. So right. Starrcade 97, anchor.fm/Front Facelock Podcast.
His details are in the description, guys. Check him out. The way they go through a pay-per-view or a wrestling event, dude, you're there. You feel it. You feel the hilarity, everything about it. Dude, it's Ryan, it's Matty. We must pose one more time for the good guys.
Go! Why don't you give it to him one more time? Woo! That's who's standing here today. Hold two. Arm bar. This is
Bret screwed Bret.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. And that's the bottom line, because